Coming to you live around the world from NOV's Studio 202. This is Inside Out Horizons. With your hosts, Lydia Brantley, Mai Belmar, Jeremy Griswold, Cass Casey, Michael Gaines, and Shelby Dumaine. Now, let's start the show.
Welcome to Inside Out Horizons. My name is Jeremy Griswold, and today we're going to be joined by Dr. Everett Redmond from the Nuclear Energy Institute. So just a reminder for those joining us today, Inside Out Horizons is a bi-weekly show, and we strive to bring you experts from across the energy industry and provide a forum for you to learn and ask questions. So Shelby, before we kick things off, why don't you tell people how they can engage with the show and interact with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so excited to have you here, Jeremy, as well. I'm excited to show the world your amazing host prowess. I think it's going to be really excellent. But yeah, if you're watching this at home, we thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions throughout the show, we invite you to comment them, whether you're watching on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. I'm in the comment sections throughout the entire show. That's why I have these screens set up here. So I'm watching what you're discussing and asking, and I want to get as many of your questions answered. And if you want to, maybe I always like to do like a practice round before, if you have a question, just first off, let us know where you're watching from. That's one of my favorite parts of the show, is seeing, hello from Italy, or from, Brazil, or maybe somewhere else in the US or Canada. I love seeing where everyone's watching from. So look forward to seeing you in the comment section there. And we got India. I see Louisette is saying hello. So thank you guys for joining. And one more time, if you have any questions, just feel free to comment those below. And if you want to watch a past episode, you can see all of those at nov.com/live. So that address is on screen now if you want to see any of our past episodes. And of course, you can always ask us any questions you have for those past ones via our email, which is socialmedia@nov.com. So that's all how you can reach us. But for now, all you have to worry about is if you have a question for today's show, just comment it and we'll get it asked at the end of the episode. All right, back to you, Jeremy.
All right, thank you. So today we have an exciting topic, and we're going to be speaking with Dr. Everett Redmond. Dr. Redmond is a senior technical advisor for New Reactor and Advanced Technology at the Nuclear Energy Institute. He's responsible for NEI's Advanced Reactor Technology program and for coordinating industry policy and programs related to current and advanced fuel cycles. Before joining NEI, Dr. Redmond spent roughly 10 years in industry, where he was a principal engineer for Holtec International. Dr. Redmond holds a PhD from MIT, and we're excited to welcome him to the show today. Welcome, Dr. Redmond.
Thank you, Jeremy. I very much appreciate being here and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So why don't we start with NEI? Can you tell us a little bit about NEI and what you do?
Sure. So NEI, we're the trade association for the commercial nuclear power industry in the United States. We represent the industry in generic regulatory matters. We are a member organization with over 300 members in approximately 17 countries. With the involvement of our members, we develop policy on key legislative and regulatory issues affecting the industry. Now, our organization and members include companies in all aspects of the nuclear fuel cycle, from uranium mining, enrichment, to fuel fabrication, reactor design and operation, as well as decommissioning. We also have members that include architect and engineering firms, as well as law firms, labor unions, national laboratories, and pharmaceutical companies. So quite a diverse membership, all focused on nuclear power.
Very good. So the audience that we have here today is traditionally an upstream oil and gas audience. So for those audience members who don't spend a lot of time thinking about nuclear technology. What is the current state of nuclear power in the U.S. and internationally?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Appreciate it. It's actually quite exciting right now. So nuclear power, nuclear energy provides about 10% of the world's electricity from about 445 reactors operating worldwide. Now, in addition to the power generation, about 50 countries utilize nuclear in research reactors. And those research reactors are used for production of medical and industrial isotopes as well as for training purposes. So there's a huge amount of nuclear being used for both electricity as well as, I said, medical and industrial uses. Now, focusing on the United States, there are currently 93 reactors operating. And last year, the fleet had an average capacity factor of 92.5%. So nuclear is baseload electricity, 24/7, 365. We're there running all the time. In the U.S., nuclear is about 20% of our nation's total electricity, and it's been that way for many years, actually. And more than 50% of all of the carbon-free electricity. And I know that's a topic that we'll talk a little bit more about, but we're 50% of carbon-free electricity here. Now, a couple things about life cycle of the plants. So nuclear plants in the United States were originally licensed for 40 years. All but 4 of those reactors have had their license extended to 60 years, and those other 4 will eventually do the same thing. Now, we are, in addition, looking at extending life to 80 years. So we've had 6 reactors so far have had their licenses extended to 80 years through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, by the way, is our sole regulator here in the U.S. And in addition to those 6, there are 7 more under review, and we expect many more to come. So nuclear is going to be, the fleet's going to be around for quite many more years, and then new reactors are coming on, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, worldwide, there are about 50 more reactors under construction. That's equivalent to approximately 15% of the capacity. Again, focusing on the U.S., we have 2 reactors under construction right now down in Georgia. They're 2 large AP1000s designed by Westinghouse. That's the Vogtle 3 and 4 plants, and they'll each generate about 1,100 megawatts electricity. And they'll come online, Vogtle 3 in 2022, followed by Vogtle 4 in 2023.
Very good. So for those just joining us today, we're joined by Dr. Everett Redmond with NEI. And we would just want to encourage you again, drop your questions below, and we'll strive to answer those towards the end of the show. So, Dr. Redmond, can you give us an idea of how nuclear technology has advanced in the past 30 years or so?
Sure, and it's amazing what has happened, actually. Last 30 years have been interesting. The last decade has really been quite fascinating. So right now within NEI, I've got over 20 developers of advanced reactors, and we refer to advanced reactors as basically those reactors that haven't been designed, haven't been built yet. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we've got over 20 developers of advanced reactors in the U.S. As members of NEI, and there's a lot more worldwide. Now, in addition to major companies that I'm sure most everybody on this podcast is familiar with, major companies like GE, Hitachi, Framatome, and Westinghouse, the majority of these advanced reactor developers are private startup companies such as NuScale, Oklo, TerraPower, X-Energy, Kairos, Ultrasafe, Holtec, and Advanced Reactor Concepts. And that's just to name a few. What's really interesting is there's private investment in these companies coming from many different sources, including investors such as Bill Gates. So Bill Gates has directly invested in TerraPower as one example. Now, when we look at these new reactors and look at the designs that are coming, we have many new designs and new sizes coming. So kind of to level set folks for a second, the reactors in the United States currently that are operating are typically between 800 to 1,300 megawatt electric. And they're water-cooled reactors. They're either pressurized water reactors or boiling water reactors. The new designs that are coming will include both water-cooled and non-water-cooled reactors, and will range in sizes from a few megawatt electric to hundreds of megawatt electric. So we refer to the really small ones, a few megawatt electric, as microreactors. And those under 300 megawatt electric are referred to as small modular reactors. Now, some of these new designs will use coolants such as molten salt, high temperature gas, or liquid metal. The microreactors, some of those will actually use heat pipes to extract the heat and to produce electricity. Now, there are new designs. Many of these new designs have more inherent safety features, automatically shut down, for example, and some of the new designs will operate at close to atmospheric pressure. So the light water reactors we currently have operate under high pressure, but the molten salt reactors and liquid metal reactors, as two examples, will operate at close to atmospheric pressure. That has many safety advantages associated with it. They'll also be operating at higher temperatures. That has a potential for increase in efficiency. Now, when we look to the horizon here for a second and we think about the reactors that are being planned, so I mentioned the two Vogtle plants, Vogtle 3 and 4, those are AP1000. In addition to those, we have 6 commercial reactors that are planned to be operational by 2030, as well as at least 2 test reactors. So in addition to the Vogtle plants that I mentioned before, we have NuScale, which is planning to build its reactor by 2029 at the Idaho National Laboratory in Idaho, near Idaho Falls, Idaho. The NuScale design is actually the first advanced reactor to be certified by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They got that done, I think it was last year or a year before now. And then we have a company, Oklo, which is the first non-water cooled reactor, and they're doing a microreactor, about 1.5 megawatt electric. They're also planning to build at INL, and their target around mid-2020s. NuScale, I think I mentioned, is looking to have their operational by 2029. For Oklo, the licensing review is underway. So we have at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission right now an application for a non-water-cooled reactor, an advanced reactor. So this is the first formal application under review. And then, switching gears just a little bit, Congress authorized and funded in FY20 a program through the Department of Energy called the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. And through that program, there have been awards made. 2 of those awards are for demonstrations of new technology by 2027. So TerraPower, with their Natrium reactor, is one of the winners, and X Energy, with their XE100, is the other winner. So real quick overview. TerraPower's Natrium reactor is a liquid metal reactor. And what's unique about it, it's about 345 megawatt electric, but what's unique is they're attaching to it a molten salt thermal storage system so that that machine can peak out at about 500 megawatt electric when needed. So when you don't need to put as much electricity on the grid, you route power over to the molten salt thermal storage system. And then when you need more power on the grid, you pull energy out of the molten salt, generate electricity, and provide more power than what the reactor does by itself. X Energy is doing high temperature gas pebble bed reactors. They're looking at a 4-pack of 80 megawatts each, so about 320 megawatt electric total. And then in addition to those, we have 2 companies, Kairos and Southern Company. So Southern Company is a utility. Kairos is another advanced reactor developer. Both of those are looking to deploy test reactors, so reactors that are non-commercial, won't generate electricity, but to test out their designs and lay the groundwork for future commercial deployment. Both of those are to be operational in the around 2026. And so the 10 companies total funded through the what we call ARDP, Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, as well as other private ventures. So it's really an exciting time right now. New technology coming online, new sizes, new designs, and a lot of new companies. And the next 10 years, this decade actually, the 20s, is going to see new reactors built here. And I just focused on the U.S. There's actually a number of machines that are being built, going to be built up in Canada as well. So they're looking at advanced reactors up there. And so there's quite a bit of activity going on in North America and then outside the U.S. as well.
So you mentioned some of those demonstrator projects will be going live in 2026. when will we have some results, or when will we know when those technologies are ready or not to be commercial?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the TerraPower and X-Energy machines I mentioned are actually commercial reactors. So those will come online in 2027, and they will generate electricity for the grid. And in fact, X-Energy is going to be built in Washington State and operated by Energy Northwest, a utility up there that already operates the reactor, Columbia Generating Station. So that reactor it's a commercial design. So once it's operational, then they'll build more of them. TerraPower's machine is also going to be a commercial machine, generate electricity. It's going to be built in Wyoming, which is unique because Wyoming doesn't have nuclear right now. And it's going to be built at an old retiring coal facility, so repowering coal. But the two test reactors I mentioned, Kairos and Southern Company, so their intent there is to, de-risk the larger design by building a smaller machine, do some experimental work with it, and that'll inform the development and the production of the larger machine. So for them, I would expect the commercial machines to come online, be built and come online in the early 2030s. And then the NuScale machine also is going to be a commercial machine generating electricity for Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems. So while I talked about these as demonstrations, they're really actually commercial reactors that are going to generate electricity.
So a large topic, or a pretty prevalent topic in our industry today, is decarbonization, finding low carbon energy solutions, and while still meeting the energy demands that the world demands of us. So what role does nuclear energy play in that low carbon energy future?
So nuclear plays a very important role in it. So as I mentioned already, nuclear right now is more than 50% of the carbon-free electricity in the U.S., and it's 20% of the total electricity production. Going forward, we expect that to increase. There's the urgency associated with deploying nuclear and the urgency associated with nuclear in terms of climate change and generating carbon-free power has increased over the years. So that's one of the things that's changed quite dramatically over the last decade as well. There's a consensus now that it's the right thing to do for the environment and the right thing to do for the economy, and a growing recognition that we can't get there without new nuclear. Nuclear is going to be essential to meet these carbon goals and meet these commitments, and it's essential to the energy transition, as I mentioned, accounting for 20% of our electricity and 50% of the carbon free. And when I talked about Natrium, for example, TerraPower's machine that has that ability to flex a bit in terms of producing more power at one time by pulling energy out of the thermal storage system, that's one example of where nuclear can work very complementary to wind and solar. All of the designs that are coming out now will work very complementary with wind and solar. So you're looking at an energy portfolio of carbon-free technologies, of which nuclear is a portion of it, a key portion of it, in addition to the wind and solar. But let's talk about some of the commitments that have been made. So Jeremy, you just mentioned that, the oil and gas sector, they're making some carbon reduction commitments. In the utility sector, there's carbon emission commitments being made. 75 utilities have publicly stated, carbon or emission reduction goals, and 53 of those have carbon-free or net zero emission goals by 2050. And quite frankly, it's unclear how we get to those net zero emission goals by 2050, but nuclear is going to have to be a big part of that, and new nuclear as well. And then, so let me focus on a couple projects. I kind of alluded to them a little bit, but let me reiterate because they're really kind of quite fascinating and directly part of this conversation on carbon reduction. So the NuScale project in Idaho by UAMP, Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, that's a carbon-free power project. That's what it's called. And they're looking at new nuclear because they're eventually going to retire coal. So looking at new nuclear, and they are a non-nuclear utility. They have no nuclear assets currently. So they're the first non-nuclear utility to look at building new nuclear, which is fabulous. And then the TerraPower project I mentioned in Wyoming. Wyoming currently doesn't have nuclear, and they're looking at building it at a retired coal plant. So I think the future is going to see more of those retiring coal plants possibly converted to nuclear. Certainly that's something the industry is looking at. There's a lot of advantages to that because you provide people, the skilled workers there with new jobs, plus you take advantage of infrastructure that's already there. Then let's go to the smaller reactors, microreactors. Microreactors have a great opportunity for remote locations. Think Canada, northern Canada, or Alaska, for example, where you've got small communities that are burning diesel that may only be able to be brought in once or twice a year. So there's a great opportunity here for microreactors. And then lastly, two other areas I want to touch on, which are related to carbon-free, and that is hydrogen. One of them is hydrogen. So there's still a lot of discussion about hydrogen economy and transitioning vehicles, for example, especially long-haul trucks, to fuel cells. And the U.S. Department of Energy is funding projects for commercial demonstration and deployment of hydrogen production from existing nuclear plants using both low-temperature and high-temperature electrolysis. So the four utilities involved in that are Energy Harbor, Xcel, Arizona Public Service, and Exelon. So we're looking at generating hydrogen now, both because it's carbon-free and can be used for many different purposes, and an alternate revenue source. So those projects are underway now. Then something new that's kind of come on the horizon, Bitcoin mining. Now, I'm not by any stretch an expert in Bitcoin mining, but suffice it to say, those folks need a large amount of power, and they are focused on doing it with carbon-free. So nuclear energy is turning out to be an optimal electricity supplier for the cryptocurrency market, because as I said, we operate 24/7 and carbon-free power. And it's going to allow the miners, cryptocurrency miners, to scale their operations in ways other generation sources might not be able to. The momentum is really already evident, actually, with nuclear operators and developers announcing deals with crypto miners. So we've got companies, Oklo, one of the developers I mentioned, Energy Harbor and Talon, both operators, are poised to support carbon-free crypto mining through arrangements that they've made. And those recent announcements are an essential step in rethinking the financial system and critical to driving our way towards a carbon-free economy. So the future of carbon-free energy is actually very exciting. Nuclear will be a part of it, along with wind and solar, and so it's very exciting.
Well, Bitcoin mining definitely wasn't something I thought would get brought up in the topic today, so we're going to leave Shelby to tag all the correct cryptocurrency hashtags for viewers who may not realize the role nuclear has to play in that.
There's also a blog post on our website that deals with that provides some more information. So your audience can take a look at that.
That's great. Well, let's go to the audience. Let's see what kind of questions have come in so far, Shelby.
Absolutely. We've gotten some fantastic questions, which, I always say that I feel like it sounds like I'm surprised. I'm never surprised. Our audience is amazing. We love them. And so this first question comes from Ibizo on LinkedIn. And I wanted to ask it first because I feel like it's a question that you hear a lot, I think, in the conversation about nuclear energy. It's something that I think is sometimes people think of, and that is, how can nuclear energy be used to increase power generation without causing harm to the environment? So I think that sometimes is something that comes up on people's minds. So what would you say to help folks with that kind of understanding?
Sure. So nuclear is extremely environmental friendly. A nuclear plant is a very small footprint compared to some of the other generation sources. So we're very compact a generation source. Let me give an example of fuel. So the current fleet refuels every 18 to 24 months. So nuclear fuel is in there, operates. Actually, nuclear fuel goes in and we refuel with about a third of the core every 18 to 24 months. So a single fuel assembly is going to be in there for 4 to 6 years. And then we've got new reactor designs that are looking at potentially reusing some of the fuel that's coming out of the existing fleet, so recycling it, That'll occur further down the road. That's not going to occur right off the bat, but we're looking at that. And then we've got other designs. Some of the microreactors will operate for 10 to 20 years without needing to refuel. And as I mentioned, we're carbon-free emissions, very small footprint, very environmentally friendly. And through the regulatory process in the U.S., we have to address all of those environmental concerns during the licensing process as we look at it. And then on back end of the fuel cycle, our fuel, spent nuclear fuel is stored safely and securely until such time as it will be disposed of. And we've been doing that for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. I think that goes kind of perfectly into the next questions we got, which I'm going to kind of combine too, so bear with me. But Humberto was wondering what replacement plans are for the oldest nuclear power plants in the U.S., and Kim was asking, kind of similarly, what are the long-term waste management concerns around nuclear? And I kind of wanted to maybe combine those two into a more broad question, which is, can you talk a little bit about the life cycle of nuclear energy and kind of help folks with that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I mentioned in my earlier comments that we've licensed the plants originally for 40 years. They've been extended out to 60 years, and some of them have now been extended out to 80 years. But when a plant is decommissioned and it is shut down, we tear down the plant, we dispose of the radioactive components of it, parts of it. The fuel is left aside and will ultimately be disposed of in a geologic repository. Now, one thing that's actually quite unique about nuclear for a second, and thinking about the decommissioning of the plant, all of the costs associated with decommissioning are paid for upfront. So we have to maintain what we call a decommissioning fund. Actually, it's regulated, and so we have to maintain the funding there to support and pay for the decommissioning of the plant when it ultimately shuts down. So that cost is all addressed up front. And so thinking about replacements here for the reactors, so we've got, as we're talking about new reactors that are being designed and being built, so I talked about some of those. So let's talk about long-term disposal of spent fuel for a quick second. So it is the consensus of deep geologic repository. So in the United States, we're still working on that, trying to identify a deep geologic repository. There's still ongoing efforts in that area, and ongoing efforts in other areas. Sweden and Finland actually are making some great progress in that, and will be disposing of fuel there in the not too distant future. But in the United States, what we do is store fuel on site in what we call dry cask storage systems. So large concrete, robust systems that are passive, no moving parts, and they're designed to last 100 years or more. But what's interesting for a second is if I take all of the used fuel in the United States from the entire life cycle of the fleet, and I were to stack it on a football field, it'd be no more than about 10 yards deep. So it's very compact. Again, I mentioned that the fuel goes in, operates for 4.5 to 6 years before coming out. So we actually have very little fuel that needs to be disposed of. And then lastly, I mentioned we have some designers looking at potentially reusing some of that fuel. So we have an excellent story here in terms of how we manage all of the life cycle of the plant.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd never really known the answer to that. So that's really cool. I didn't even think of possibly reusing or how that would look. So it's great. And this next question, I really love it. It's from Gotham. And when I saw this, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Because when I think of a nuclear power plant in my mind as a newbie to nuclear into the industry, you picture these big, huge plants. But he was asking, what is the feasibility of small modular reactors versus those kind of large scale reactors that we're used to seeing?
Oh, it's here now. So NuScale, for example, their design is they have a design. It's either a 4-pack, a 6-pack, or a 12-pack. So they've got like a 70 megawatt reactor, 70 megawatt electric, compared to, think, the Vogtle plant 3 and 4 that we're building are 1,000 plus megawatt electric. So a 70 megawatt electric, and you'd build 4, 6, 12 of them in the same building. That provides you enormous flexibilities as well as increased more inherent safety with the smaller designs. So this technology is here now, NuScale has already been approved by the NRC, and then UAMPS is the one that's going to deploy that by 2029 at Idaho National Laboratory. And then you've got the other companies working on small modular reactors as well. X-Energy was one I mentioned. Holtec International is also working on a small modular reactor, about 165 megawatt electric. So it's here today, and we will begin construction of the NuScale plant in the not too distant future.
Mm-hmm. And we got a little follow-up question to that. Is there any possibility of those kind of smaller scale reactors replacing anything like coal boilers?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt. And coal plants range in many different sizes, from 100 megawatts electric upwards. I mean, I'm not a coal person, but I know that they come in a range of sizes. So we're certainly looking at the idea of repowering a coal facility with nuclear, and some of these designs with the different sizes fit in quite nicely. TerraPower actually, and kind of alluded to this before, is going to build their machine, which is not quite small modular, so it's bigger. It's a 345 megawatt electric plant, but again, not the 1,000 megawatt deal. And they're going to build that at a retiring coal site in Wyoming. So again, this idea of using retiring coal sites and replacing it with nuclear is now coming to fruition, and that reactor should be operational by 2027. I don't know that the specific site in Wyoming's been chosen yet, but it will be in Wyoming at a retired coal site.
Wow, that's really exciting. And this next question comes from Michael on LinkedIn, and he's wondering, are molten salt reactors as efficient as those powered by uranium?
Oh, so great question, too. So molten salt reactors actually are powered by, so you got two choices. The ones that we're designing in the United States, for the most part, are going to be powered by uranium as well. So you'll have uranium dissolved in the salt, and so it's a liquid coolant and liquid fuel at the same time, which is unique, but it's been done before. We demonstrated it at Oak Ridge National Laboratory back in the early 70s. So you do have uranium in there. Then there are a few companies, couple companies in the U.S., some more companies outside the U.S. looking at a thorium fuel cycle. But predominantly companies in the United States are looking at uranium, continuing the uranium fuel cycle, and the molten salt reactors would also use uranium.
I love when I see follow-up questions, because we got one. You mentioned thorium in there, and we got a question from Arnold on LinkedIn, and he's wondering, what's your view, what's your take on thorium, or maybe what the best resource for fuel is considered, in your opinion, again?
Yeah, so right now we have a uranium fuel cycle in this country, and we have a huge amount of infrastructure associated with it, from the mining to the fabrication to the reactor designs. And there's a huge amount of momentum associated with that. So I think the uranium fuel cycle is here to stay for decades to come. There are companies looking at thorium fuel cycles, and there's some potential advantages to it, but there's just a few companies doing that in the United States. So I think for the most part, what you're going to see is uranium fuel cycle continue. And we're not short on uranium right now. I certainly actually would hope we'd get to the point where, we build enough reactors that becomes a consideration. But the uranium fuel cycle is here to stay for decades to come. But thorium is being investigated, and I certainly encourage those companies to do that, and I look forward to seeing how that develops.
Absolutely. And I think, I saved maybe, I might be biased. My favorite question, we're talking a little bit about kind of public perception. I'm the biggest marketing nerd I think you might meet. And it's something that I think the oil and gas, or in general, the energy industry has in common with nuclear, which is how do we overcome public perceptions regarding stuff like safety? And I mean that for nuclear. How do you see that industry kind of overcoming that public perception?
Well, we're out there talking to folks, and so, in the projects that are coming up, we're doing the outreach to the new communities, outreach to the states, and having that conversation about the new designs, about advanced nuclear, what they offer, how they're a little bit different, what the safety aspects of them are. So it really is continued conversation, but also emphasizing, the role that nuclear has in the climate change in combating climate change and providing carbon-free reductions. So as one example, so back during, our industry is pretty open in terms of providing access and explaining things. So we do that quite regularly. And during the accident at Fukushima in Japan, we opened up our facilities here and provided access to the press and other folks to come in and take a look and talk about it. So we're continuing that conversation and talking and engaging early and often when talking about the new designs. So that's key. Just have to keep talking, keep engaging.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you so much to our audience for all of those amazing questions. If you still have more, feel free to comment. We keep checking these even after the live is over, but you can also always email us at socialmedia@nov.com. And I believe we also have Dr. Redmond's email here as well. We can put that on screen. It is ELR, there it is, @nei.org. So if you have any questions and you want to reach out to him specifically, you can find him there. But for now, back to you, Jeremy.
Okay, so we want to just thank you, Dr. Redmond, for spending your time with us this morning, and thank you to the audience for also joining in the conversation. Those are some really great questions. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks. We'll have Cass Casey on, and she'll be bringing you a great interview. And in the meantime, you can catch past episodes of Inside Out Horizons as well as NOV Live on nov.com/live. So again, Dr. Redmond, thank you for joining us. And
thank you.
Thank you, audience, and we'll see you next time.